Hey, I'm Matt Lownes here at LTV with Town Supervisor Peter Van Scoyoc, and this is Ask the Supervisor. We are back here. It is Monday, October 25th. Peter, hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Matt. Nice to see you again.
You too. I saw you yesterday. We passed by down at the youth park in Amagansett. It was getting honored for Lee Hayes yesterday afternoon.
Yes, that was quite an event at noon yesterday. We gathered there with quite a few of the Hayes family members. This is a very large local family. I think in total there's something like 250 members of the family. When they have a family reunion, I think they rent the American Legion Hall. But Lee Hayes was a longtime resident of East Hampton. He's most known for being a Tuskegee Airman. So during World War II, he was attached to a bomber squadron and flew multiple flights, a certified pilot. As many know, the Tuskegee Airmen were an elite air group. This is during the time of segregation, and the Tuskegee Airmen were all Black servicemen who trained and served their country exceedingly well. They had a really amazing record in the war. And when they got back after the war, again, many of them certified as pilots, like Lee Hayes was, unable to find work as pilots, even though the aircraft industry was expanding exponentially. Those barriers still existed, and they weren't being hired by airline companies. Despite that, Lee pushed on with his life. He was a Democratic committeeman during Judith Hope's term. Judith was, as you know, maybe the first female supervisor ever elected in Suffolk County. He also worked to get the first Black postal workers in East Hampton. And so, I think it's very fitting to recognize Lee's contributions to our nation and to our town, and long overdue. And I was very pleased to offer a resolution, gets unanimous support from the town board, to dedicate the Amagansett Youth Park to Lieutenant Lee Hayes. So it was really a wonderful occasion. A lot of the community came out to support it, and we unveiled the sign and had some speeches and some prayers by Reverend Walter Thompson from Calvary Baptist Church as well. So we hope to have an even bigger celebration and a dedication inside the park on Juneteenth of 2022. So put it on your calendar now.
Great thing the town did, and I remember when I was a young kid growing up, he actually came to our school in Amagansett and talked to us and told us his whole story. So it was a great thing that you guys did yesterday. And if you have a chance, go check out the new youth park and check out the new sign. And remember, you can call in and ask questions for Supervisor Peter Van Scoyoc. The call-in number is up top, right above us, right above me, right there. So you can call in and ask questions. Peter, let's start off with anything new for the town that you want to bring to everyone's attention.
Well, we have expanded COVID testing. The numbers, unfortunately, while they were trending down after the spike in September, they started trending down somewhat, but now they've gone back up. The increase over the past week is about 1.5%. So that's concerning. We have expanded testing because we know that having quick test results is very helpful in trying to stem the spread of this, disease. And so the new group that we have coming in is Care One Concierge. They're currently at the CDCH building, former CDCH at 110 Stephen Hand's Path. They're operating 8 hours a day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We're hoping to expand that and have them here at the town hall site, as well as Montauk going forward. And the lab that we're using has a 24-hour guaranteed turnaround time from the time they receive the sample, which is generally, you get tested one day and you're generally getting your results next day. That was one of the problems we were having more recently with the existing vendor that they weren't getting the tests turned around in time and weren't able to handle the capacity and demand for testing. So we thought we'd try to bring the best possible access to rapid testing. And the other thing about the testing now with Care One is that it is a PCR test, which is the most reliable test, especially once you're symptomatic, and it's a saliva test rather than the nasal swab, so it's a lot less intrusive. If anyone's had a nasal swab, it's not the most comfortable thing to do versus just spitting in a little cup. So, I think that will be a welcome change as well for residents or visitors who are looking to get tested right away.
Now, the termination with the contract with MedEvolve happened fairly quick. Can you talk about the new lab that it's going through, that the tests are now going through? I think
the lab is actually a local Long Island lab, and it's located in Garden City, and they have a tremendous amount of capacity. So that's why we've made this change. Again, if you can't get the test results quickly, they're a lot less meaningful, and some of the dates were actually starting to stretch out quite far. So that's why we made the change.
Okay. Hey, power to you. We want to get the most accurate results, and nobody's gonna argue otherwise. That's for sure. Let's move on to what seems to be the most talked about topic in East Hampton. The temporary closure of the airport is what seems to be the latest from at least the East Hampton Star, which I was reading. And with that, we do have a question I posted to Facebook earlier today, and you know him, I know him. Bill McKee asks, if the airport does get fully closed, could affordable housing replace the airport at that location?
Yes, that's a really good question, and part of what I think the community wants to know is part of this re-envisioning process. If we were to permanently close the airport, what kind of things could occur there? We've looked at what the underlying zoning is and what the environmental constraints are, and depending on exactly where on that 640-acre property we're talking about, I think it's unlikely that it would be a good site for affordable housing because it's in a special groundwater protection area. And that particular location in Wayne-Scott, that whole general area, is very sandy soils, and it's a really critical part of the recharge for our aquifer. So the biggest part of the aquifer is at that location. And as you know, groundwater is our most precious resource, and we need to do what we can to protect it. So further development, of that degree, you'd have to take a very careful look at it. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I will say at this point that I don't support closing the airport. I support, significantly reducing the volume of aircraft, the frequency of aircraft, and the environmental and noise impacts of aircraft. And so I think we can dial things back to an acceptable level in order for the airport to remain open. If that becomes impossible to do, then I'll say that any options on the table. But I believe that we can get to a level of use that the community will accept. Maybe not everybody will be happy about it. The other thing I want to say about the airport, and this is something a lot of people don't know, is even though it's an airport and it's cleared, it contains some of the most, environmentally endangered species in all of New York State. It's maritime grassland habitat because it's clear, and there are certain plants and animals that exist there that exist almost nowhere else in New York State. So we're aware of that. So any disruption to grasslands, and some people say, well, wait, don't you mow that area? And so we do mow it at least once a year, and that's to keep shrubs and trees from growing, which is why that particular habitat is so rare.
Okay.
So that's another aspect that maybe people don't know about. But affordable housing, to me, that's a much more critical issue right now than the airport. The airport's getting an awful lot of focus, and there's a lot of discussion and frankly noise about it. It's an important issue, but I'm very concerned about the housing affordability crisis that we're in right now.
Yeah, and that's something that we can move on to now, actually. That's something I've been talking to people about, whether it be Tom Rule, he's the head of housing and development for the town, or Michael Daly. He has an organization called YIMBY, Yes, in My Backyard. And it seems to be as though affordable housing is the number one issue, whether or not there's signs picketed throughout town. And this was in the East Hampton Star this past week. In the East Hampton School District, due to resignations, around 12 of the teachers have taken on a sixth class, costing the school anywhere from $14,000 to $30,000, depending on seniority, that being a stipend. Teachers also have been asked to teach outside their official certifications. All of this is due to affordable housing for teachers. With that being said, other local schools are dealing with this as well. It's not just East Hampton, it's Sag Harbor, it's Pearson, it's Bridgehampton, it's Southampton as well. But with that being said, the article mentions a teachers village that I believe was built in either Jersey City or Newark, New Jersey. It took 10 years to build, but it was about 200 some odd apartments specifically for teachers. Obviously, there's no right answer, Peter. But to you, is this something that we could think about as far as reimagining East Hampton moving forward, a specific location for teachers only, as they're now taking on extra classes even?
So, I think there's some legal issues that would have to be sussed out. I mean, the fair housing laws in this country are prevent you from discriminating or selecting just a single, maybe occupation or class of people that could get housing, be eligible for housing. Now, that is probably something that could occur if the business or owner, was looking to house staff. And I do think, staff working for a company or an entity probably would qualify for that kind of a distinction. But for maybe other publicly funded projects, we wouldn't likely be able to do that. I know, and by the way, I'll be a panelist on a portable housing discussion at the high school in the auditorium this week, actually tomorrow night at 6:30, Tuesday, 6:30, where we'll, delve into some of these issues even deeper. But I know that the idea of affordable housing to some means those who are at the very lowest level of the economic scale. That is definitely not the case here. It's everybody from that level all the way up to, doctors, nurses, other, white collar professionals, teachers. We all struggle now with hiring and retaining staff, whether you're the municipal government, whether you're a school district, whether you're a local business. Restaurants aren't operating full weekly schedules because they can't find the staff. This is not just a problem here in East Hampton. It's becoming a problem all over the country. But it really does relate to a large degree to the inequity in wealth. And there's really no way a person who relies on the local economy for work to be able to afford to be here anymore. Unless you already have a situation set, if you already have the foot in the door, perhaps. But anybody else starting out, rental housing all disappeared during the pandemic. People vacating the city with deeper pockets bought everything up, and it's a frightening circumstance. I was talking to the director of the Springs Food Pantry. She's now seeing over 900 they're serving on a weekly basis. That's a huge increase, and the economy's supposed to be coming back now, and it really relates to housing. And she's seeing when they're packing up food for families, the numbers of people in each family are increasing, which indicates that more people are having to share housing because there is such a dearth of it.
So I guess, not to make this like keep just nagging on this topic, but what would you say to a college graduate, a recent college graduate in the nursing industry that found a job in Southampton but can't find somewhere to live? How do we help? What can we do about people like that moving forward? Or is that part of the issue?
Well, I mean, I think that is the question. How do we resolve this problem or address it in a meaningful way? And how quickly can we do it? Because we need to move very quickly. This is really eroding the community, the services within the community. We see even just commuting in now from more affordable areas is not even practical. And for instance, one of the ways that I've tried to address this here at Town Hall is that this year in the budget, I am regrading over 100 positions. We're trying to stay competitive to be able to attract people to make that drive. And we're not going to be able to do it just in 1 year. We're going to see that we have to, raise our rate of pay significantly in order to be able to attract and retain staff. So it's a big concern to me. There are a number of ways that we can address this. One of the promising aspects is an additional revenue source that can be a reality if the citizens of East Hampton pass a referendum this time next year, which would be to approve the community housing fund legislation that was sponsored by Fred Thiel. It went to Governor Cuomo last year. He did not sign it. This year, Governor Kathy Hochul did sign it. I met with her in August and was able to express to her the dire situation that we're in. And I know that a lot of other folks were lobbying as well. And I want to thank, the assemblyman for, proposing and shepherding this legislation through both houses. But that would allow us to, much like the Community Preservation Fund has given us large revenues, which we could purchase open space, this would be a transfer tax. So people buying properties would pay, and there is a threshold, and first-time home buyers are exempt as well. But that money would go into a fund. It's estimated that East Hampton would have received about $8 million last year from that transfer tax had it been already in place. That can start to have a significant impact. That's money that we can leverage with other grants and other financing sources to address housing across a very wide spectrum, from seasonal housing to year-round housing. I think it's always best if we can provide home ownership or an ownership share, because I think that in those situations, people are more committed to the community. It's good to have this money staying in the community. It circulates within the community rather than just driving out of town, every afternoon. So, it would be great to have what's spent here circulate here. So
No, I mean, that was a great answer, and it's a tough situation. But like Peter said, tomorrow there's going to be a meeting at the East Hampton High School, 6:30. You're going to be there. Superintendent Fine's going to be there to talk about affordable housing. So that's good. Obviously, as seems as though everyone's talking about either affordable housing, the airport, and or the cell tower. Are there any updates with the cell tower, Peter?
So we've been back and forth with American Tower, who is the leaseholder at the Girl Scout camp for the Springs Tower. I think we're making good progress. We've had a couple different red line versions circulated back and forth. I'm hopeful we can reach an agreement. The Girl Scouts have certainly expressed their desire to make available to us their site. and to meet the height requirements that we need and location for the emergency communications equipment that would complete our town-wide upgrade of emergency communications. I did commit to having a location in Springs, which they haven't had in the past. So I'm hopeful that we can come to an agreement and move forward. That would also allow for carriers to be placed on that same tower for personal wireless communications. So I think, Springs is certainly the most underserved given the number of people living there. It's the most densely populated part of our community. And I think probably the most underserved with regard to cellular communications. So that's a problem, another problem we need to solve. And I think we're well on our way to solving it.
Awesome. That's good news. Yesterday, there was 14 cited for demonstration at the 4,000 acre beach access at Napeague Sands. Most locals out here call it Truck Beach. Do you have anything to say about that?
Actually, I think it was a week ago yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my dates wrong.
That occurred. There was a protest, civil disobedience. I want to thank all the participants for being respectful and peaceful in their civil disobedience. We're under a court order to prosecute for trespass anyone who would be driving on that section of beach. We're obligated to do so, as much as I would not like to have to do that. We are fulfilling our requirements under the temporary restraining order. And those individuals were notified ahead of time what would happen and given the opportunity to avoid this. And, we did cite them. The 14 different violations, people were issued violations rather. I don't think this situation is done by any means. The town has been looking into condemnation of this stretch of beach. As you know, Matt, the appellate court overturned the earlier decision, which granted the town the rights over the beach. And subsequent to that reversal, the plaintiffs in the case sought a temporary restraining order to enjoin the town and to basically become private security guards for those property owners.
Yeah.
We are trying to address that because what the appellate court ruled was that the Benson reservations, which allowed and granted the rights to fish to the people of East Hampton and to lay nets and other such language, was reaffirmed by the appellate court, and yet the TRO went beyond that and said nobody can go there.
Okay.
So concerned about that. We're still fighting to, ensure that those rights of public beach access for our traditional purposes continue at this stretch and elsewhere in town.
Yeah, I would just like to also recognize the fact that you mentioned that it was a peaceful protest. There was no violence or anything like that. So that's obviously the good thing. Moving forward, it's election season. You're up for re-election this upcoming Tuesday, November 2nd. I'm gonna be very simple with you, Peter. I got one very basic question. What's your number one priority item entering the next election if you were to win?
Well, I think it's before, I take on the next term, really. It's, and we talked about it already. I'm extremely concerned about the housing crisis right now.
Yeah.
There are some really big and pressing issues, and we're going to be dealing with all of them, whether it's the airport. We have climate change that is here. We have to be dealing with that and taking steps. But I think if we can't address this housing problem, our community will end up being gutted. And I don't even think that those who have recently arrived will like the result of that, because it's really going to change the nature of our town. Businesses will not be able to continue to operate if we don't figure this out. So,
Yeah, we've seen just from my local standpoint, we've seen many restaurants already sell for good. Babette's closed recently down on Main Street. You have restaurants and shops up for sale left and right. So to your point, there's not going to be anything here for anyone to begin with. It is very interesting. And from my perspective, I'm young, I'm out of college. I see it in a different way that some of the people I've talked to that I mentioned earlier, and or that I've discussed this with. But it's certainly frustrating. And I agree with you that it seems to be the top long-term and short-term issue here, even though there's erosion and there's no cell service, but it affects everything from teachers to the fire and rescue that are all volunteers out here.
yeah, I mean, in some ways, some of those other issues don't even matter by comparison if there's no community left, no local community. I think, we lose that generations of history and tradition, knowledge about the town. It really is the unraveling of the fabric of our small town community. And again, to me, I think it's the most pressing issue, although some other really important issues are maybe getting more attention. Coastal erosion, sea level rise, that is an ominous and ever-present looming danger. We have so much real estate and property value at risk, and the impacts of that on our tax base are sobering. The potential impacts on our beaches are very sobering. People will want to try to protect their property, and in the process, they'll be crying for hard structures to try to build a wall against the sea. And if we let that happen, we won't have public beaches here anymore. So that's looming. Actually, we'll be participating in the express session panel discussion about that topic on Thursday night, and that's going to be via Zoom. I'm not sure that it's going to be live, but it will be certainly rebroadcast on our favorite channel, LTV, at some point. That occurs at 6 p.m. on Thursday. So, I mean, that's another really important issue that we'll have to be continuing to work on. We need to start implementing our coastal assessment and resiliency plan objectives, some of the Hamlet study objectives. We need to keep making progress on that. We're still pressing forward with the Army Corps of Engineers to get the sand-only replenishment of Montauk's downtown beach. That's run into some snags because we're tied in the contract with Southampton that has, I think currently they're being required to gain easements on 500 different properties, even though only about 129 properties are actually within the project. So we're trying to work through those obstacles and support Southampton in that effort, because our futures are closely tied to each other. We're looking to create an erosion control district to take over some of the long-term funding. And then we have an adaptive strategy that will need to be put into place. And we still have some economic study and research to do about transfer development rights and how we can have an orderly and well-sustained and supported plan to adapt to our changing coastline. So there's a lot on the plate.
No, there really is. I mean, you just covered a lot there in the last 90 seconds. Power to you, Peter. Your passion for it is still there. The only last thing I want to say before we wrap up is to remind everyone to vote. I think it's really important you get the right to vote in this country. It's a lot easier in this country than elsewhere. So use it. Use it. That's my only plea. I'm never going to make a plea on this show, but vote. You have your opportunity to vote next week, so go and vote. Peter, if you don't have any last thoughts.
Well, I'll just add on to that. It is our civic duty as living in a democracy voice our opinions and to make the direction that we want things to move in known, and we do that by voting. That is our right, and it's an obligation, really. We need to have a good, solid turnout. I'd like to see people turn out, and if you're not voting, you really shouldn't be complaining.
And on that note, I'll see you next Monday at 5 p.m. I'm pretty sure we're still on, even though the election's the next day. We'll see you next Monday here at 5 p.m. This is Ask the Supervisor. I'm Matt Lownes here with Peter Van Scoyoc. Peter, I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks so much, Matt. Stay safe and be well, everyone.
Yep. Stay safe, everyone.